The cursor blinked on the computer screen like a racing heart, and Sophia Reynolds felt each beat echo in her ears as she stared at the inbox of her professional email. Sent. The word seemed to pulse in red, even though it was in black, mocking her with its irreversibility. Her hands trembled over the keyboard, her fingers cold despite the heater being on in her small apartment in Portland, Oregon. It was 6:15 in the morning in December, still dark outside, and she had woken up with that visceral feeling that something was terribly wrong. The memory of the previous night came in chaotic fragments. The red wine that Claire had insisted on opening, then another and another. The laughter of friends as they played a silly game of writing letters to Santa Claus, as if they were still children. Except that Sophia had taken it too seriously, had let the words flow unfiltered, had poured 3 years of carefully guarded feelings into paragraphs that should never have left her heart. And she had sent it all to Nathan Cross, her boss. The man for whom she organized meetings, filtered calls, brewed coffee, and kept the professional life running with the precision of a Swiss watch. The man who greeted her every morning with a polite nod and treated her with cordial but distant respect. The man whose rare smile she had mentally collected like precious treasures over 3 long years. Sophia tried to access the corporate email system for the 10th time. Her administrative credentials denied again. The screen flashed with a cold message. Access denied. Contact the IT department. It was Saturday morning, Christmas Eve. There was no IT department available. There was no one who could undo what she had done. She reread the draft that was still in her personal email, the one that was supposed to go to her best friend, Madison, but which, by some cruel twist of fate and autocomplete, had been directed to Nathan Cross. Each word was a stab of embarrassment. My only Christmas wish is that someone sees me for who I really am. Not the efficient assistant, not the woman who always has the right answers and organized documents. I want to be seen as the person who cries watching dog commercials, who dances alone in the kitchen, who is afraid of storms, and who is terribly, hopelessly in love with a man who barely knows I exist beyond the walls of the office. It got worse. Much worse. Nathan Cross is the kind of man who makes the world seem possible. When he smiles, really smiles, it feels like the sun rises just for me. I know every detail about him. I know he drinks black coffee at 7 in the morning and cappuccino at 3 in the afternoon. I know he rubs his left temple when he's stressed and drums his fingers when he's thinking of a creative solution. I know he is kind to the cleaning staff and that he donates anonymously to at least 5 charities. I know all this, and he knows nothing about me. And that's okay, because having him in my life, even from a distance, is already more than I ever imagined I would have. There was more. Much more. Confessions about how she arrived 15 minutes early just to have those moments alone in the office, preparing everything for him. How she kept the notes he scribbled and then discarded, not out of obsession, but because there was something intimate in that slanted handwriting, in those unfiltered thoughts. How sometimes she daydreamed during meetings, imagining a different life where they met under other circumstances, where she was brave enough to be more than just competent and invisible. The phone rang, cutting through the silence of the apartment like a blade. The name on the screen made her stomach churn. Nathan Cross. Personal cell. He never called from his personal cell. In 3 years, she had only received calls from the office number, and even then rarely, as he preferred to simply show up at her desk when he needed something. Sophia watched the phone ring, paralyzed. Letting it go to voicemail would only prolong the inevitable. With a trembling hand, she answered. Sophia. His voice was different, lower, laden with something she couldn't identify. I need to see you, today. Mr. Cross, I can explain. Her voice came out strangled, tiny. Not over the phone. He interrupted, gentle but firm. Can you come to the office in an hour? It's Christmas Eve, She swallowed hard. Sure, I'll be there. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Sophia, he said, and there was something different in how he pronounced her name, as if he were tasting the sound of it. You don't need to be afraid. The call ended before she could respond. The journey to the office passed in a blur of morning fog and Christmas lights that seemed to mock her misery. Portland was quiet, most people still asleep or enjoying the holiday with their families. The Cross Enterprises building, a modern glass and steel structure in the heart of the financial district, was practically deserted. Sophia used her access card, the beep of the system echoing in the empty lobby like a foreboding. The elevator ascended to the 23rd floor, each illuminated number increasing her anxiety. She had chosen professional attire, an armor of normalcy, gray dress pants, a white blouse, flat shoes. She had pulled her brown hair into a tight bun and checked 3 times to ensure her makeup covered the dark circles from a restless night. The doors opened to the familiar corridor. Her desk was to the right, impeccably organized as always. To the left, the double mahogany doors of Nathan's office were closed, but light was seeping underneath them. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothed her clothes, and knocked. "Come in." The office was exactly as she had left it on Friday, except for his presence. Nathan Cross was standing by the panoramic window, hands in the pockets of his dark jeans. He wasn't wearing a suit, she noted with surprise. It was the first time she had seen him in casual clothes, jeans, a gray button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong arms she had never really noticed before. Or maybe she had noticed, but had never allowed herself to admit it. He turned when she entered, and what Sophia saw in his eyes made the ground feel unstable beneath her feet. There was no anger there. There was none of the polite embarrassment she had expected. There was intensity, vulnerability, and something that looked dangerously like reciprocity. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the leather sofa near the coffee table, not to the formal chair in front of his desk. Sophia obeyed, her legs barely able to support her. Nathan did not return to his executive chair. Instead, he sat beside her on the sofa, close enough for her to feel his warmth, to see the golden strands mixed with the brown in his hair. "Mr. Cross, she began, but he raised his hand. "Nathan," he said softly, "I think we've moved beyond formalities, don't you?" She looked at her hands, unable to hold that gaze. "I read your email," Nathan continued, and his voice had a husky quality she had never heard before. "I read it 3 times, then 4. I stayed up all night reading." Humiliation burned on Sophia's cheeks. "I was drunk. It was a terrible mistake. I'll submit my resignation on Monday and—" "Sophia, look at me." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't an order either. It was something in between, intimate. She forced her eyes to meet his, green-gray like the ocean in a storm. Nathan leaned slightly forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Tell me your real wish, Sophia." She blinked, confused. "I already told you, in the email, everything." "No." He shook his head, and a small, almost sad smile touched his lips. "You wrote about me, about how you see me, about being in love with who you think I am." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was a raw vulnerability in his voice. "But you didn't tell me what you really want. If you could have anything, any version of the future, what would it be?" The question hung in the air between them like an unspoken confession, and Sophia felt its weight settle in her chest. The office, usually a sanctuary of efficiency and professional distance, now felt too small, too intimate. The soft morning light filtered through the panoramic windows, casting long shadows over the Persian rug she had helped choose 2 years ago. Every detail of that space carried memories of shared moments that weren't really shared, only observed by her from afar. "I don't know," Sophia whispered finally, the words trembling out. "I've never let myself think about that." Nathan shifted on the sofa, adjusting his position to face her completely. The closeness was disconcerting, breaking all the unspoken rules they had maintained for 3 years. Sophia could see the small lines around his eyes, marks of worry and responsibility he carried. She could smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something more essential, more human. "Then let it go now," he said, and there was a gentle urgency in his voice. "Because I spent the whole night realizing that I built walls so high around me that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. And if there's one thing your email showed me, Sophia, it's that I've also been a coward." She blinked, confused by the shift in dynamics. "You're not a coward. You're the bravest man I know. You built this company from the ground up, face relentless investors, make decisions that affect hundreds of people." "Professional courage isn't the same as personal courage," Nathan interrupted, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration she recognized instantly. How many times had she seen that gesture through the slightly open door of his office during tough calls? "You wrote that you know I drink black coffee at 7 in the morning and cappuccino at 3 in the afternoon. Sophia, I know those things about you too. I know you organize documents by color when you're anxious. I know you bite your lower lip when you're focused. I know you give your lunch to the homeless man on the corner every Tuesday and that you think no one notices." Sophia's heart raced, beating against her ribs like a caged bird. "You notice?" "I noticed everything," he admitted, and there was a raw vulnerability in his eyes that she had never witnessed before. "The way you tilt your head when you're really listening to someone, not just politely. How your eyes darken when you're in love with an idea. The way you hum softly when you think you're alone in the filing room, always old songs your grandmother used to sing." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. "How do you know about my grandmother?" "You mentioned it once, a 1.5 years ago, when we were working late. You thought I was too busy reviewing contracts to pay attention, but I heard every word." Nathan hesitated, and then did something that completely changed the balance between them. He reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb catching a tear that had escaped. "I keep your stories like you keep my discarded notes." His touch was electric, sending waves of awareness through every nerve in Sophia's body. She should pull away, maintain some semblance of professionalism, but she was paralyzed by the intensity of the moment. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Nathan lowered his hand but didn't pull away. "For the same reason you didn't. Fear of complicating things. Fear of losing what we already had, even if it was just a sanitized version of connection. And maybe," he paused, searching for the right words, "maybe because I didn't think I deserved something real. This company has consumed my entire life. At 36, I built an empire but forgot to build a life. It's easier to hide behind meetings and quarterly reports than to admit you're lonely." The confession resonated in Sophia's chest because she understood perfectly. How many nights had she spent alone in her apartment, convincing herself that being near him at work was enough? How many times had she turned down invitations from friends, opportunities to meet other people, because none of them could compare to the man she saw every day but never really had? "So what do we do now?" Sophia asked, forcing herself to be practical even as her heart raced in 1,000 different directions. Nathan leaned back slightly, creating a small space between them that felt enormous. "That's the question, isn't it? Because there are real consequences here. You work for me. There are company policies, perceptions from others, complications that can't be ignored just because." He gestured between them. "Because this is real. Do you think it's real?" The words slipped out before Sophia could censor them, vulnerable and hopeful. "Sophia, look at me." He waited until she found his eyes again. "I spent 3 years trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just professional respect. That the reason I look forward to each morning is because you make my job easier. That my chest tightens when you smile at someone in accounting is just because I'm territorial about my team." He shook his head, a bitter smile touching his lips. But your email shattered that carefully constructed illusion. Because when I read your words, it was like looking in a mirror. Every feeling you described, I felt too. And if that's not real, then I don't know what is. The air between them vibrated with unspoken possibilities, with 3 years of unrecognized tension finally finding a voice. Sophia wanted to lean forward, close the distance, discover if his lips were as soft as they seemed. But a practical part of her, the part that had survived by building walls and keeping expectations low, hesitated. "I could lose my job," she said calmly. "Even if you don't fire me, people will talk. They'll say I slept my way up, even if nothing ever happened between us." "I know." Nathan rubbed his left temple, that familiar gesture of stress she knew so well. "And I won't pretend to have all the answers. Maybe you need to transfer to another department. Maybe we need to be discreet at first. Or maybe—" He paused, and something determined crossed his face. "Maybe I need to stop letting the fear of complications keep me from living my life." Sophia studied his face, searching for signs of hesitation or regret. But all she saw was raw honesty and something that looked dangerously like hope. "You still haven't answered my question," Nathan said softly, bringing the conversation back to the starting point. "Your real wish, Sophia. Not what you think is practical or sensible. What does your heart truly want?" She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to imagine. Not the edited, safe version she always projected, but the complete and terrifying truth. When she opened her eyes again, there was a surprising clarity in them. "I want to wake up in the morning and not have to separate who I am into acceptable versions," she began, each word gaining strength. "I want someone who knows me completely, the organized and competent parts, but also the woman who is afraid of storms and cries at commercials. I want to build something real with someone, not just observe his life from afar." She took a deep breath. "And I want that someone to be you, Nathan. Not my boss, not the brilliant CEO everyone admires. Just you, the man who donates anonymously to charity and is kind to people who can do nothing for him. The man I see when no one else is looking." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Nathan didn't move immediately, just held her gaze with an intensity that made Sophia feel exposed and seen at the same time. "Then let's do this the right way," he said finally, his voice firm with determination. "No hiding, no shame. Let's figure out together how to navigate this." And when he reached out his hand, not as a boss to an employee, but as a man reaching for a woman who had finally found the courage to reach back, Sophia didn't hesitate. She intertwined her fingers with his, and the world didn't crumble. Instead, something new and fragile began to bloom in the space between who they were and who they could become. Nathan's hand was warm and firm, and Sophia felt the world reorganize around that point of contact. 3 years of carefully maintained distance evaporated in the moment their fingers intertwined, and she realized with surprising clarity that there was no going back. They had crossed an invisible line that transformed everything, every future interaction, every glance, every word. "I need to know one thing," Nathan said, his voice low but clear. He didn't let go of her hand, and his thumb traced unconscious circles on her skin, sending waves of awareness through her arm. "When you wrote that you were in love with me, was it the wine talking, or was it you?" Sophia could have hidden behind an easy excuse, blamed the alcohol, and preserved some dignity. But looking into his eyes, seeing the real vulnerability there, she could do nothing but be honest. "It was me," as she admitted, feeling her cheeks warm. "The wine just gave me the courage to put on paper what I've been feeling for a long time. Probably since that first year when you stayed until 3 a.m. helping me reorganize the entire filing system after the server crashed. You didn't have to do that, but you stayed." A genuine, slightly surprised smile touched his lips. "You remember that." "I remember everything," Sophia said simply, and she realized it was true. Every shared moment, every small kindness, Every look that lasted a second longer than professional, she had archived all of them somewhere deep in her heart. Nathan stood up from the sofa but didn't let go of her hand, gently pulling her to stand as well. He guided her to the panoramic window, and together they looked out at Portland, waking below them. The morning fog still covered parts of the city, but the sun was beginning to break through it, transforming everything into shades of gold and pink. "Look at that." He pointed to a small square visible below where a huge Christmas tree was decorated with thousands of lights. Even from a distance, they could see some people gathered around it. "Every year I prepare my schedule to avoid spending Christmas alone in the office. There's always a business event, a corporate dinner, some obligation that allows me to pretend I have a life beyond this building." He paused, turning to look at her directly. "But this year, the only thing I want is to discover who you really are when you're not being my perfect assistant." Sophia's heart raced. "I may not be as interesting as you think. I spend most of my time reading novels, cooking complicated recipes just for myself, and watching old series on Netflix." "What series?" Nathan asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "Gilmore Girls," she admitted, bracing herself for some judgment. "I've watched it all the way through 4 times. To her surprise, Nathan laughed, a rich sound she rarely heard. "My sister used to make me watch it when we were teenagers. She said I needed a positive male influence because our dad wasn't around." His expression softened with the memory. "You actually remind me of her. Rachel had that same combination of strength and tenderness, that ability to see the best in people even when they didn't deserve it." "Did?" Sophia caught the verb in the past tense, seeing the shadow cross his face. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes returning to the window. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. It was quick and brutal, and when it was over, I realized I had built this whole company partly to prove something to her, to show that the poor kid from Milwaukee she always defended could do something important." He swallowed hard, the emotion evident in his voice. "But in the process, I forgot to live the life she would have wanted me to live. A real life, with real connections." Sophia squeezed his hand, not knowing what to say, but wanting to offer comfort. She had never known about his sister, about Milwaukee, about any part of his life before Cross Enterprises. He kept everything so guarded, so private. "I'm sorry," she finally said, the words inadequate but sincere. "She would be proud of you anyway." "I don't know," Nathan replied honestly. "Rachel always said that success without happiness wasn't really success. She would have scolded me for working all these weekends, for never bringing someone special to meet her." He looked at Sophia with an intensity that made her hold her breath. "But she would have liked you, a lot." The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time not from embarrassment or fear, but from something deeper, more hopeful. Here was this man she had watched from afar for so long, finally letting her see the parts of him he kept hidden from the world. "Can you tell me about your family?" Nathan asked, gently moving them back to the sofa. This time, when they sat down, the space between them was smaller, their knees almost touching. "You mentioned your grandmother in that email, the songs she sang." Sophia smiled, letting the memories come. "My grandmother Margaret raised me after my mom passed away when I was 7. My dad wasn't in the picture, so it was just the 2 of us in a small house in Eugene. She sang all the time, old jazz songs she learned when she was young. She used to say that music was the only thing that couldn't be taken from you, no matter how hard life got." She paused, unconsciously touching the delicate necklace she always wore, a simple silver chain with a small bird. "She died in my last year of college. That's why I came to Portland, to start over somewhere without so many memories. And ended up here making my life functional," Nathan said softly. "I ended up here building a safe life," Sophia corrected. "One where I had control, where I knew what to expect every day, where no one could hurt me because I didn't let anyone get close enough. Until the wine broke down your defenses and you accidentally let me in, Nathan observed, a trace of humor in his voice. Sophia laughed, a sound that came out half shaky but genuine. Worst accident of my life. Or the best, I'm still deciding. Let me help you decide, Nathan said, and suddenly he was closer, his free hand rising to touch her face with a gentleness that made her heart stop. Can I kiss you, Sophia? Not as your boss, not out of obligation or pity, but because I've been thinking about it for longer than I should admit. And now that we can finally be honest with each other, I don't want to wait any longer. Sophia could barely nod before he closed the distance between them. The kiss was different from anything she had imagined in the countless times she had fantasized about this moment. It was soft and questioning at first, as if he were memorizing her taste, the texture of her lips. But when she responded, her fingers finding their way into his hair, something changed. The kiss deepened, 3 years of unresolved tension pouring into every touch, every shared breath. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, and Sophia saw her own astonishment reflected in his eyes. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a reverence that made her tremble. Best accident, he whispered, and she felt the smile in his voice. Definitely the best accident. They stayed like that for a moment, breaths calming, the world outside temporarily forgotten. But reality began to seep in slowly, bringing with it all the complications they had mentioned before. What do we do now? Sophia asked, echoing her earlier question, but with a different weight now, after that kiss that changed everything. Nathan pulled back enough to look at her properly, but kept his hands on her face, as if fearing she would disappear if he let her go. Now, we do what we should have done years ago. We get to know each other for real, outside this office. We have dinner together, not as boss and employee, but as two people discovering if what we feel is based in reality or just proximity and convenience. And what about work? Sophia had to ask, her practical side unable to let the question go. Monday we talk to HR, Nathan said, determined. We see the options. Maybe you transfer to another department, work for Marcus in the marketing division. He's been asking for someone with your skills for months. Or maybe we find another solution. But I'm not going to ask you to choose between your job and this. Between us. He gently kissed her forehead. You've worked too hard to build your career here. I'm not going to let anything compromise that. The consideration in his words made Sophia's chest tighten with emotion. And if it doesn't work? If we find out that what we feel was just fantasy? Nathan smiled, and there was confidence there, but also vulnerability. Then at least we tried. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering about the what-ifs. He paused, his eyes searching hers. But Sophia, something tells me this is real. More real than anything I've ever felt before. And when he pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her in an embrace that felt both new and familiar, Sophia allowed herself to believe. To believe that maybe, just maybe, that accidental Christmas mistake could turn into the best gift she had ever received. A future where she no longer had to watch life happen from afar, but could finally participate in it, fully and without fear, with the man who had captured her heart, long before she found the courage to admit it. The coffee on the table between them cooled as they talked, and Sophia realized with surprise that 2 hours had passed since she arrived at the office. 2 hours that felt both like an eternity and just a few minutes. Nathan had gotten up to fetch water from the small fridge hidden behind a wooden panel, and she watched him move through the space she knew so well, but now seemed completely different. I have a confession to make, Nathan said, returning with 2 bottles of water. He sat down again, but this time chose the space directly beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly. That filing system that crashed in the first year, when we stayed until 3 in the morning reorganizing everything? Sophia accepted the bottle, curious. What about it? It didn't crash on its own. He avoided her eyes for a moment, a trace of guilt crossing his face. I kind of caused the problem on purpose. Well, not completely on purpose, but when I realized I would have an excuse to spend time with you outside normal hours, maybe I didn't rush to fix it as quickly as I could have. Sophia blinked, processing the information. You sabotaged your own system? Sabotage is a strong word, Nathan defended, but there was humor in his voice. I prefer to think of it as strategically delaying a solution. You were so new to the company, so determined to prove your worth. And I kept looking for excuses to talk to you beyond work matters, but never found the right opening. He finally looked at her, vulnerable. That night was the first time we really talked, remember? You told me about your grandmother, about growing up in Eugene, about how you wanted to build a career where you could make a real difference. The memories came back with surprising clarity. Sophia remembered being surrounded by filing boxes, her fingers stained with printer ink, and Nathan sitting on the floor beside her instead of delegating and leaving. She had thought at the time that he was being extraordinarily kind, but never imagined he had ulterior motives. You are terrible, she said, but she was smiling. I spent the whole night feeling guilty for not backing up properly, and all the while you knew exactly what had happened. In my defense, you learned valuable lessons about backup systems, Nathan argued, his eyes sparkling with amusement. And I learned that you sing when you're nervous, that you have a contagious laugh, and that even exhausted at 3 a.m, you still care about organizing everything perfectly. Sophia shook her head, amazed. How many other moments she had carefully stored also meant something to him? How many times had they been in exactly the same emotional place, but kept their distance out of fear or propriety? It must have been frustrating, she observed, to keep everything bottled up for so long. It was torture, Nathan admitted, especially in moments like that corporate dinner in September when you wore that blue dress, or when Marcus from accounting wouldn't stop flirting with you at the summer happy hour, and I had to make up an emergency just to avoid making a scene. You made up that emergency. Sophia remembered that night clearly. Marcus had been persistent, and she had been looking for a polite way out when Nathan suddenly appeared, saying they needed to review a contract urgently. I thought there was actually a crisis. The only crisis was my sanity, Nathan said dryly. Watching that idiot touch your arm, making you laugh, while I stood there pretending to be just your boss worried about productivity. He paused, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture. Did you go out with him afterward? Once, Sophia admitted, watching his jaw tense. But I spent the whole dinner comparing everything about him to you, and I realized it wasn't fair to either of us. After that, I stopped accepting invites. It seemed easier just not to try. Nathan turned completely to her, taking her hand again. We wasted so much time, didn't we? Or maybe it was the right time now, Sophia suggested. Maybe we needed 3 years building trust and friendship before we were ready for this. She gestured between them, to the charged space they now occupied. He considered this, tracing distracted patterns on the back of her hand. The touch was casually intimate, the kind of thing comfortable people did without thinking. Sophia marveled at how quickly they had gone from carefully distant professionals to this natural intertwining of personal space and physical contact. Tell me something you never had the courage to say to me, Nathan suddenly asked. Something you've kept all these years. Sophia bit her lip, thinking. There were so many things, little moments and observations she had kept private. Do you remember that disastrous presentation for the Japanese investors 2 years ago? When the projector failed and half the documents were in the wrong order. How could I forget? Nathan grimaced. It was one of the worst days of my professional career. You were perfect, Sophia said calmly. Everyone in the office was panicking, saying the company was done for, that we would lose the investment. But you just stood up and did the whole presentation from memory, no notes, no visible panic. And when you finished, the investors were more impressed than they would have been with a polished presentation. She held his gaze. I was in the room, taking notes, and I remember thinking that I was witnessing the moment you went from being just successful to being truly exceptional. And I remember being absolutely certain that I was in love with you, completely and irrevocably. The expression on Nathan's face was one of pure astonishment. You never said anything, not a compliment, nothing. Because it would have revealed too much, Sophia explained. Because if I started talking about how proud I was of you, about how I believed in you, I wouldn't have been able to stop. I would have spilled everything right there in front of the whole team and ruined the only thing I had, which was being close to you every day. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of that confession. When he opened them again, there was raw emotion in them. That was one of the hardest days of my life. Not because of the investors, though that was stressful enough, but because when it was all over and you came to my office to organize the papers, you smiled at me and said, "Good job, Mr. Cross." And all I wanted was to pull you into my arms and kiss you until we couldn't breathe. Instead, I thanked you formally and watched you leave and felt miserable for the rest of the week. I didn't know, Sophia whispered. Are we a pathetic pair or what? Nathan said with self-deprecating humor. Two adults completely incapable of basic communication. We're communicating now, Sophia pointed out. We are, he agreed, and then did something completely unexpected. He stood up and extended his hand to her. Come with me. Sophia took his hand, confused but confident. He led her out of the office, down the quiet hallway, to the small executive kitchen she kept stocked with her favorite coffees and those Italian cookies he liked, but pretended not to eat too much. Nathan opened the upper cabinet, the one she needed a stool to reach, and pulled out an antique metal box she had never noticed before. He placed it on the counter between them and opened it slowly. Inside was a collection of small objects that made Sophia's heart stop. A coffee napkin with a doodle she had drawn during a boring meeting a year ago. The wrapper of a chocolate she had left on his desk for his birthday with a simple note of congratulations. A post-it where she had written an inspiring quote when he was stressed about a difficult acquisition. Dozens of little things she didn't even remember giving or leaving, all carefully preserved. You kept all this? Her voice came out choked with emotion. Every piece of you that I was allowed to have, Nathan confirmed. I said I wasn't that different from you keeping my notes. This box is my pathetic version of keeping you close when I couldn't really have you. Sophia picked up the napkin, recalling vaguely that day. She had drawn a ridiculous cat in a tie during a particularly long finance department presentation. Nathan had smiled when he saw it, one of those rare smiles she collected, and she had left the napkin behind without thinking. This is the sweetest and saddest thing I've ever seen, she said honestly. Story of my life for the past 3 years, Nathan replied. Sweet because you were there, part of my daily routine. Sad because it was never enough, and I knew it was my own fault for not having the courage to change the situation. Sophia placed the napkin back carefully and closed the box. Then she did something she had wanted to do since that first kiss. She stepped closer, placed her hands on his shoulders, and kissed him with all the emotion she had kept bottled up for 3 long years. This kiss was different from the previous one, deeper, more urgent, filled with the recognition of how much time they had lost and how much lay ahead. When they pulled apart, Nathan was smiling, that full and genuine smile she loved. I should have sent that email years ago. Maybe, Sophia agreed, but then we wouldn't have this story to tell. And as they stood there in the small kitchen, surrounded by coffee and carefully preserved memories, Sophia realized that the most embarrassing mistake of her life had turned into the beginning of something extraordinary, something real, scary, and completely inevitable since the first day their eyes met across a conference table 3 years ago. The sunlight filtering through the office windows had changed angles, marking the passage of hours as Sophia and Nathan remained in their newly formed bubble of honesty. Sophia's phone vibrated in the bag she had left near the sofa, pulling them back to reality with an insistent reminder that the world beyond those walls still existed. "My friends," Sophia explained, quickly checking the screen. "Claire is asking if I'm okay, if I survived the hangover and the email disaster." She paused, rereading the accumulated messages. Apparently, they thought I would be in full panic mode today. Nathan leaned in to see the screen, his proximity sending waves of warmth through Sophia's arm. "You should respond. Let them know you're fine. Better than fine, actually." Sophia typed a quick reply, keeping the details vague but reassuring her friends that she was okay and had a lot to share. Almost immediately, her phone exploded with heart emojis and question marks, but she put it back in her bag, not ready to share this fragile and precious moment just yet. "I have a question," Nathan said, his voice becoming more serious. "And I need you to be honest with me, even if the answer is hard to hear." Sophia felt her stomach tighten with nerves, but she nodded for him to continue. "When you imagined what it would be like if this happened, if I reciprocated your feelings, how did you think it would be?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because there's a difference between the fantasy we build in our heads and the reality of actually being with someone, with all the complications and imperfections that come along." It was a fair question, and Sophia appreciated the seriousness with which he asked it. She thought about it, really thought, before responding. "Honestly," she began, turning to face him fully, "I never let myself imagine a complete happy ending. It was always fragments, stolen moments, a kiss in an empty elevator perhaps, or you holding my hand at some corporate event where no one knew us. But a real relationship, where we deal with bills, argue about where to spend Christmas, negotiate closet space." She shook her head. "I never let myself go that far because it felt too impossible." Nathan absorbed this, his eyes never leaving her face. "And now that it's possible, what do you want?" "Everything," Sophia admitted, the word coming out like a confession. "The beautiful parts and the complicated parts, the lazy Sunday mornings and the arguments about who forgot to buy milk. I want to build something real with you, Nathan. Not just live in stolen moments." She took a deep breath. "But I'm also terrified, because what if I disappoint you? What if the real version of me isn't as interesting as the idea you've built?" "Then we're the same," Nathan replied, touching her face with a tenderness that made her chest tighten. "Because I've spent 3 years watching you be extraordinary at everything you do, and the idea that I might not measure up, that I might disappoint you in some way, terrifies me too." He smiled, small and vulnerable. "But I think that means we're taking this seriously, that we understand it's not a game." A notification sound from Nathan's computer interrupted the moment, and he grimaced as he looked at the screen. "Investors," he explained. "Some follow-up emails that need responses before the holiday ends." Sophia recognized the shift in his body language, the way his shoulders became slightly tenser, the focus returning to professional mode. It was a pattern she knew intimately, having observed it 1,000 times before. But this time, instead of simply accepting it and returning to her own work, she did something different. "Can I help you?" she offered. But when he started to automatically accept, she raised her hand. "Not as your assistant. As your partner. Someone who cares about you and doesn't want you to spend Christmas Eve stressed about work emails." The expression on Nathan's face softened, and Sophia saw the moment he understood what she was really offering. A new dynamic. A new pattern of interaction that wasn't defined by corporate hierarchy, but by mutual choice and care. "I would love that," he said simply, and together they moved to his desk. For an hour they worked side by side, but this time everything was different. Nathan asked for her opinion not because he was obligated to, but because he genuinely valued her perspective. She offered suggestions that went beyond her administrative role, stepping into territory of strategy and vision. And when their fingers accidentally brushed while reaching for the same document, neither of them pulled away as they would have before. "You've always been so good with people," Nathan remarked at one point, after Sophia had rephrased a particularly delicate email for a difficult investor. The way you balance firmness with diplomacy, it's a real talent. I learned by watching you, Sophia admitted. The way you handle complicated personalities, how you never lose your cool even when I know you're furious inside. She paused. Though I have to confess, I've always wondered what you did with all that frustration. You're so controlled in the office. Nathan laughed, a low and genuine sound. Gym, mostly, and there's a punching bag in my apartment that's taken a lot of hits over the years. He looked at her with self-deprecating humor. Particularly after that summer happy hour where Marcus wouldn't stop flirting with you. You really hit a punching bag thinking about Marcus from accounting? Sophia couldn't help the laughter that bubbled in her throat. For 2 hours, Nathan confirmed. And then I went for a 10-kilometer run because it still wasn't enough. My personal trainer was impressed with my sudden dedication. I didn't have the heart to tell him it was all sexual frustration and misplaced jealousy. Sophia's laughter filled the office, genuine and unrestrained, and Nathan watched her with an expression that made her blush to the roots of her hair. It was the way he looked at her, as if he were witnessing something precious and rare. I love it when you laugh like that, he said, without embarrassment or hesitation. Free and complete without holding back. You do it so rarely at work. Because professionalism, Sophia replied, but she was smiling. You can't just be laughing in the middle of a corporate office. Why not? Nathan challenged. Who made that rule? And why do we follow it so religiously that we forget to be human? It was a good question, and there was no easy answer. They had built so many rules over the years, so many walls and protocols that seemed necessary, but now revealed themselves as obstacles to real connection. Nathan's phone rang, this time his personal cell, and he checked the caller ID before answering. My mom, he explained to Sophia, and then on the phone, Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas Eve. Sophia began to rise, offering privacy, but Nathan held her hand, keeping her by his side. She could hear the warm, slightly exasperated female voice on the other end. Yes, I'm still at the office, Nathan admitted. But no, I'm not alone this time. Actually, there's someone here I'd like you to meet. Soon. He paused, listening, and his eyes met Sophia's with a playful glint. No, Mom. It's not a client or investor. It's complicated, but in the best way possible. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, Nathan skillfully navigating his mother's questions while keeping details vague. But Sophia could feel the affection in his voice, the patience and love he had for his family. It was another side of him she rarely saw, the devoted son behind the relentless CEO. When he hung up, Nathan turned to her with a slightly apologetic expression. My mom is persistent. She's been nagging me for years to bring someone special to meet her. He hesitated. Would it be too soon to suggest you come for Christmas lunch tomorrow? I know you probably have your own plans, and I don't want to pressure you, but I don't have plans, Sophia gently interrupted. I was going to spend the day watching old movies and pretending I didn't care about being alone. She squeezed his hand. And I would love to meet your mom if you're sure you're ready to explain this whole situation to her. My mom is going to love you, Nathan said confidently. She always complains that I work too much, that I need to find someone who understands my life, but also challenges me to live beyond the office. He pulled Sophia closer. You're exactly who she's always said I needed, even before I realized it. The afternoon turned into evening, and they finally packed up their work, the pile of emails answered and problems resolved. The building was even quieter now, Portland outside beginning to light up with Christmas lights as families gathered for Eve celebrations. I don't want this to end, Nathan admitted as they walked together to the elevator, their hands intertwined as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This day, this bubble where it's just the two of us figuring this out. It doesn't have to end, Sophia said. We can have dinner together, keep talking. We still have so much to learn about each other. Nathan smiled, pressing the elevator button. Do you like Thai food? I know a little place in Pearl District that's open even on holidays. The owner owes me a favor. I love Thai food, Sophia replied, and then, because she could, because everything had changed, she leaned in and kissed the line of his jaw, feeling him shudder at the touch. And I love that you have plans that involve us being together. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped in together, and Nathan immediately pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as they descended the 23 floors. It was reckless and adolescent and completely perfect. And when they finally exited on the ground floor, both were laughing, unsteady, and completely lost in the moment. The night security guard blinked in surprise at seeing them together, clearly not professional, but he was polite enough to just wave as they passed. Sophia imagined there would be conversations in the office when they returned, speculations and gossip. But for the first time, she didn't care. Let people talk. She had something real. Something worth any complication that might come. The Thai restaurant was tucked away on a side street in the Pearl District, its modest facade masking the cozy interior lit by red and gold paper lanterns. The aroma of lemongrass and ginger enveloped Sophia the moment Nathan held the door for her, a chivalrous gesture that made her smile. Inside, only 3 other tables were occupied, creating an atmosphere of intimacy that felt tailor-made for them. An elderly man with graying hair and a warm smile emerged from the kitchen, his eyes lighting up when he saw Nathan. They exchanged greetings in Thai, words that Sophia didn't understand, but clearly carried mutual affection. The man then turned his attention to her, studying her face with paternal interest. So, you finally brought someone, Nathan, he said in English with a soft accent, his eyes dancing with humor. In 5 years coming here, always alone or with men in suits talking business, I thought I would never see this day. Nathan laughed, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist in a possessive yet gentle gesture that made her feel both protected and seen. Somchai, this is Sophia, and you're absolutely right. She's special. Somchai guided them to a table in the corner, near a window that offered a view of the street decorated with Christmas lights. He didn't offer menus, just winked and said he would prepare something special for the occasion. When he disappeared back into the kitchen, Sophia found herself alone with Nathan in a completely different context from the office, and the reality of what was happening hit with renewed force. You've been coming here for 5 years? She asked, settling into her chair as Nathan sat beside her instead of across the table, choosing closeness over convention. Since it opened, Nathan confirmed. Somchai was a chef at a high-end restaurant in Bangkok before immigrating. His wife passed away just before he opened this place, and there was something about the way he channeled his pain into creating something beautiful that resonated with me. He paused, his fingers finding Sophia's on the table. After Rachel died, I used to come here late at night when I couldn't face my empty apartment. Somchai never asked why I showed up at 10 at night asking for curry and rice. He just prepared food and sometimes sat with me, sharing stories about his wife. Sophia squeezed his hand, beginning to understand the layers of pain Nathan had carried alone. She had seen the long hours at the office, the almost obsessive dedication to work, but she had never known it was partly an escape, a way to avoid facing loss and loneliness. Do you still think about her? About your sister? Sophia asked softly, knowing she was treading on delicate territory, but wanting to understand the full extent of who he was. Every day, Nathan admitted without hesitation. Rachel was my only real family after our father left, and our mother struggled to raise us working 3 jobs. She was the one who believed I could be more than just another poor kid from Milwaukee with no future. She paid for my first semester of college with money she should have used for her own medical treatment. His voice grew hoarse with emotion. When I found out what she had done, I was furious, but she just smiled and said investing in me was investing in both our futures, that I would build something great and she would be there to see it. But she wasn't, Sophia completed softly, seeing the pain cross his face. No, cancer was aggressive, and by the time I had enough money for the best treatments, it was too late. She made me promise in the hospital that I wouldn't waste my life on regrets, that I would build not just a business, but a life worth living. Nathan looked directly into Sophia's eyes, raw vulnerability in his gaze. I broke that promise for 5 years, burying myself in work and convincing myself that professional success was enough, until I read your email and realized I was doing exactly what she feared, existing but not really living. Tears pricked Sophia's eyes, and she didn't try to hide them. She would be proud of you anyway, of the man you've become, of the integrity with which you run your business. Maybe, Nathan conceded, but she would be happier knowing I finally found someone who sees me beyond the CEO, beyond the achievements and the bank account, someone who cares about the parts I keep hidden. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. You see me, Sophia. You really see me. And that's the most precious gift anyone could give me. Before Sophia could respond, Somchai returned with a tray of steaming dishes, each more colorful and aromatic than the last. He presented them with evident pride, explaining each preparation in detail that showcased years of culinary mastery. When he finally left them to enjoy the meal, Nathan and Sophia found themselves surrounded by an abundance that seemed symbolic of what they were building. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, and using the food as an excuse to feed each other, an act of intimacy that would have been unthinkable just hours before. Sophia discovered that Nathan liked spicy food but couldn't handle real Thai chilies, that he had a particular technique for eating noodles that was both endearing and awkward, and that his entire face lit up when he experienced flavors that genuinely surprised him. "Tell me about your friends," Nathan asked between bites of pad Thai. "The ones who were with you on the night of the fateful email. Did they know about your feelings for me?" Sophia grimaced. Claire suspected. She worked with me in my first year and always commented on how I seemed different when you walked into the room. But I vehemently denied it, saying it was just professionalism. She took a sip of iced tea. Madison, my best friend since college, knew the whole truth. She was the one who endured my late-night calls when I was sad, who convinced me not to quit 3 different times because she thought I wouldn't be able to keep working near you. You thought about quitting? Nathan seemed genuinely surprised and disturbed by the revelation. Several times, Sophia admitted. Especially after social events where you showed up with some beautiful date. I know they were just corporate commitments, but seeing you with other women, even in a platonic context, was torture. Madison had to convince me I was being dramatic, that a good job shouldn't be sacrificed for unrequited feelings. Nathan set down his utensils, his attention completely focused on her. You never noticed that those dates changed constantly? That I never brought the same woman twice? I thought you liked variety, Sophia said, feeling her cheeks heat with the realization of how much she had presumptively misjudged. I liked not having complications, Nathan corrected. They were professional escorts hired through a reputable agency, women who understood that the arrangement was purely transactional for events where showing up alone would be commented on. I never slept with any of them, never even kissed them beyond a formal cheek greeting. He took Sophia's hand again, his touch firm and reassuring. Because how could I be with someone else when I spent every day longing for the woman who organized my schedule and made my coffee? The confession hung between them, laden with years of missed opportunities and unexpressed desires. Sophia felt emotion rise in her throat, the reality of how much time they had wasted being simultaneously frustrating and somehow perfect. Because perhaps they needed that time, those 3 years building a foundation of trust and mutual respect before they were ready for this. So what happens now? Sophia asked, echoing the question she had posed multiple times throughout the day. But that gained new meanings with each repetition. Monday comes. We go back to the office and then... Nathan considered carefully before responding, and Sophia appreciated that he didn't offer easy guarantees or empty promises. On Monday, we schedule a meeting with HR and explain the situation. We explore options for transferring departments for you, perhaps to the business development division where your skills would be better utilized anyway. He paused. And we're honest with the team. Not immediately, not in a formal announcement, but we let people notice naturally that something has changed between us. Because I'm going to want to touch you, Sophia. I'm going to want to bring you coffee instead of the other way around. I'm going to want everyone to know that you're not just my assistant, but the woman who managed to do the impossible and make me really live again. His words were like promises wrapped in vulnerability, and Sophia felt any remaining doubt dissolve. This man, this powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar contracts, was offering her not just his heart, but his complete honesty about the complications that would come. "And your mom?" Sophia asked, remembering the invitation for Christmas lunch. "What do we tell her?" A smile crossed Nathan's face, transforming his features from serious to almost mischievous. "We tell the truth. That you accidentally sent the most honest and courageous email I've ever received, and that I was smart enough not to let you slip away." He leaned in closer, his forehead touching hers. "My mom is going to adore you, Sophia. She always said I needed someone who wasn't afraid to challenge me, to see me beyond success and responsibilities. And you do that just by existing." They finished the meal in lighter conversation, sharing childhood stories and embarrassing moments that gradually built the kind of intimacy that came from knowing someone's little truths. Sophia learned that Nathan had an irrational fear of clowns from a traumatic incident at a birthday party when he was 6, that he secretly loved cooking reality shows despite barely knowing how to cook, and that he dreamed of one day learning to play the piano, but never found the time. When they finally left the restaurant, the night was clear and cold, Portland shining with holiday decorations that transformed the city into something magical. Nathan took Sophia's hand as they walked aimlessly, simply enjoying being together without the office walls defining their roles. "Thank you," Nathan said softly after several blocks of comfortable silence. "Why?" Sophia asked, confused. "For being brave enough to write that email, even though you didn't intend for me to see it. For giving me the chance to be honest about my own feelings. For not running away this morning, when it would have been easier to just disappear." He stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, pulling her into his arms under the soft glow of Christmas lights hanging above them. "For giving me hope that I can have both professional success and personal happiness, that I don't have to choose between the two." Sophia leaned into the embrace, feeling his heartbeat steady against her ear, and knew with absolute certainty that it was all worth it. The shame, the fear, the years of silence, all had led to this perfect moment, where they were finally just two humans choosing each other, without excuses or defenses. When he kissed her there on the street, Sophia didn't care who might see. She simply melted against him, savoring the promise of all the tomorrows they now had together. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in a fine mist, transforming Portland into a watercolor of grays and whites, as Sophia stood before the bathroom mirror, trying to decide for the 5th time whether her dark green dress was too formal or not formal enough to meet Nathan's mother. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the silver necklace her grandmother had left her, the little bird perched delicately against her collarbone like a talisman of courage. The phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "I'm out front. You don't need to be nervous. She already loves you." Easy for him to say, Sophia thought with exasperated affection, grabbing her purse and checking once more to see if she had brought the expensive wine Claire insisted was appropriate for first impressions. She locked her apartment and descended the stairs, each step a physical reminder of how everything had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been paralyzed with shame and terror. Now, she was about to spend Christmas with the family of the man she loved, who miraculously loved her back. Nathan was leaning against his black Tesla, wearing a grey sweater over a white shirt and dark jeans that made him look simultaneously casual and devastatingly attractive. When he saw her, His whole face lit up with that smile she mentally collected, and Sophia felt any residual anxiety begin to melt away. "Beautiful," he said simply as she approached, pulling her into a kiss that would have sent the nosy neighbors into a frenzy if they had been watching. When they broke apart, he studied her face intently. "You're really nervous, aren't you?" "Terrified," Sophia admitted. "What if she doesn't like me? What if she thinks I'm not good enough for you, or that our situation is too inappropriate?" Nathan intertwined his fingers with hers, bringing her hand to his lips. "My mom has spent the last 5 years begging me to bring anyone home. The fact that I'm bringing someone who really means something to me is going to make her the happiest woman in Oregon." He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. "Besides, I warned her last night. I told her everything about the email, about how we feel, about the complications at work. She cried, Sophia. Tears of happiness because I'm finally letting someone in." The tension in Sophia's shoulders eased slightly. Knowing it wouldn't be a complete surprise helped, although it also meant expectations would be high. She got into the car, appreciating the warm interior and the subtle scent of Nathan's cologne mixed with new leather. Margaret Cross's house was in Lake Oswego, a suburban neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown Portland, known for its waterfront properties and mature trees. Nathan explained during the drive that he had bought the house for his mother 3 years ago, after she finally agreed to leave the small apartment in Milwaukee, where she had raised him and Rachel with limited resources, but abundant love. She resisted for a long time, Nathan shared as he drove. She said she didn't need a big house, that it was a waste. But when I mentioned that Rachel would have wanted her to have a garden for her roses, she finally caved. His voice grew hoarse with emotion. Rachel always promised that when we were financially stable, she would buy a house with a huge garden for Mom to grow all the flowers she wanted. Sophia squeezed his hand on the gear shift, offering silent comfort. With each story Nathan shared about his sister, she felt Rachel's presence in their lives, not as a sad shadow, but as a gentle inspiration, reminding them to live fully and love without reservation. The house was charming without being ostentatious, a craftsman-style building with a wraparound porch and dormant vines from winter that Sophia imagined would become lush in spring. Before they could reach the door, it opened to reveal a small woman with silver hair cut short and green eyes identical to Nathan's, shining with unshed tears and obvious joy. "Nathan," she said, and even that one word carried so much love that Sophia felt emotion rise in her own throat. Then those green eyes turned to her, studying her with an intensity that should have been intimidating but somehow only felt warm. "And you must be Sophia." "Mrs. Cross, it's a pleasure to meet you," Sophia began formally, but Margaret was already hugging her, despite the height difference forcing the older woman to stretch. "Margaret, dear, or Maggie, whichever you prefer." She pulled back, holding Sophia by the shoulders and smiling through the tears that were now flowing freely. "You made my son smile like this for the first time in years. I already love you for that." The interior of the house smelled of cinnamon and pine, holiday decorations tastefully scattered that spoke of years of family traditions. Photos covered almost every available surface, and Sophia noticed that many included a young girl with the same radiant smile as Nathan, obviously Rachel at various ages. There was no sadness in the way the photos were displayed, only a celebration of a life lived intensely, even if briefly. Margaret guided them to the spacious kitchen where she had clearly spent the morning preparing a feast that seemed disproportionate for 3 people. Turkey was roasting in the oven, mashed potatoes waiting in a large pot, and various vegetables were prepped for final cooking. It was an abundance of love translated into food, and Sophia recognized the impulse to nurture through feeding. She herself often cooked too much when she was emotional. "Can I help with anything?" Sophia offered, wanting to feel useful and also needing to do something with her nervous hands. "Could you make the gravy?" Margaret asked, pointing to ingredients already set out on the counter. "Nathan burned it last year, and we still don't trust him near anything that requires real attention." "Hey!" Nathan protested with feigned indignation. "It was one time, and you admitted the recipe was confusing." "The recipe clearly said to stir constantly," Margaret countered, but she was smiling. "You were too busy checking work emails to pay attention." The familiar pattern of teasing between mother and son was so full of affection that Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. She thought of her own grandmother, the mornings spent together preparing meals, sharing stories, building memories that were now precious treasures kept in her heart. Watching Nathan with his mother was seeing a completely different side of him. The devoted son who put his family above all, despite the business empire he had built. As they worked in the kitchen, Margaret asked questions that seemed simultaneously casual and carefully chosen, clearly trying to get to know who Sophia was beyond the woman who had captured her son's heart. Sophia found herself responding honestly, sharing stories about her grandmother Margaret, the coincidence of names that made Nathan's mother smile with pleasure, about growing up in Eugene, about finding her way to Portland and eventually to Cross Enterprises. "So you worked for Nathan for 3 years before finally confessing your feelings?" Margaret asked as she checked the turkey, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, not judgment. "Not exactly confessed," Sophia admitted, feeling her cheeks heat up. "It was more like accidentally revealing everything in an email I didn't intend to send." Margaret laughed, a rich sound that reminded Sophia of Nathan. Sometimes the best moments of our lives come from the worst mistakes. She looked significantly at her son. "Nathan told me about the email, about how it was meant for a friend, but ended up with him. He said it was the most honest gift he ever received." Nathan, who had been setting the dinner table in the adjacent room, appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Because it was. Everyone in my life wants something from me. Investors want returns, employees want direction, acquaintances want connections. Sophia just wanted to know me, the real man behind the title." His eyes found hers across the kitchen. "That's rare and precious." "And you, dear?" Margaret gently asked Sophia. "Have you found the man you hoped to find, or is reality different from expectation?" It was a thoughtful question, requiring an honest answer. Sophia paused in the gravy she was stirring, carefully considering. "It's different," she finally admitted. "I spent 3 years observing Nathan at work, seeing how he treated people, taking note of every little gesture of kindness. I built an image of him based on those observations." She looked at Nathan, who was watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. But getting to know him really, seeing the parts he keeps hidden from the professional world, the vulnerabilities and fears and hopes, is infinitely better than any fantasy, because it's real, and real is messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Margaret wiped her eyes with her apron, clearly moved. "Rachel would say you were made for each other. She always believed in soulmates, even when I thought she was being too romantic." She looked at the framed photo on the kitchen wall, a teenage girl with a ridiculous tiara and a huge smile. "She would have made Nathan bring you to meet her immediately, would have subjected you to a full interrogation about intentions and compatibility. And then, if she approved, she would be your biggest advocate." "Tell me about her," Sophia impulsively requested. "I want to know the woman who was so important to you both." Margaret's eyes lit up, and for the next hour, as they finished preparing the meal and eventually sat down to eat, Sophia listened to stories about Rachel Cross, the girl who defended her younger brother from bullies at school, even though she was smaller than him. The teenager who worked 2 jobs to help with household expenses but never complained. The young adult who faced a cancer diagnosis with grace and humor, more concerned about family than her own suffering. "She made Nathan promise," Margaret said as they served the pumpkin pie that was clearly a family recipe, "that he wouldn't waste life on regrets, that he would build not just a career but also a family, real connections that would matter more than any bank account." She looked significantly between Nathan and Sophia. "I think he's finally keeping that promise." After dinner, when Margaret insisted on washing the dishes alone, despite both of their protests, Nathan led Sophia to the back porch that overlooked the dormant garden. The air was cold but not uncomfortable, and they settled into a wooden swing, covered with a thick blanket that smelled of lavender. "Thank you for coming today," Nathan said, pulling her close until she rested her head on his shoulder. "For meeting my mom, for hearing about Rachel, for becoming part of this." "Your mom is wonderful," Sophia replied honestly. "And Rachel, even having never met her, I feel like I understand an important part of who you are through the stories." She paused, looking at the empty garden that would be lush in the warmer months. "I think she would approve of this. Us." "I know she would," Nathan said confidently. "Rachel always said that when she found the right person, she would know, because it would be both easier and scarier than anything she had ever experienced before. Easier because the connection would be natural, scarier because she would finally have something real to lose." He kissed the top of Sophia's head. "That's exactly how I feel about you." They swung in silence for a few minutes, watching birds visit the feeder that Margaret clearly kept stocked. The peace of the moment was profound, the kind of contentment that came from being exactly where you were meant to be, with exactly who you were meant to be with. "Monday is going to be interesting," Sophia finally said, bringing up the reality that awaited them when the holiday bubble burst. "It will be," Nathan agreed. "But we'll face it together. HR, difficult conversations, possible department transfer, all the complications." He turned her to look directly into her eyes. "But at the end of the day, we'll come home together. We'll build something real that goes beyond the office." "Home," Sophia repeated, testing how the word sounded. She still had her apartment, Nathan had his, but there was an implicit promise in that word, a future where they would share space and life completely. "Eventually," Nathan clarified, reading her thoughts. "I'm not rushing anything, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't think about it. Waking up with you every morning, making coffee together, arguing over closet space and who forgot to buy milk." He smiled, that full smile she loved so much. "All the mundane parts of shared life that make everything real." Sophia kissed him then, pouring all the emotions of the day into the contact, gratitude and hope and love that she had yet to say out loud. But that pulsed in every beat of her heart. When they broke apart, both were smiling, breaths creating mist in the cold air. The door to the porch opened, and Margaret appeared with 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing over the mugs before retreating back inside, giving them privacy once more. "Your mom is the best hostess I've ever met," Sophia observed, savoring the rich chocolate. "She is special," Nathan agreed. "And she's completely in love with you, I can tell." They stayed on the porch until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that transformed the dormant garden into something magical.